Chapter 1. The Night I Realized I Was Their Contingency Plan. At 6:42 a.m. on a Tuesday, federal investigators showed up at my father's office after my family accused me of being selfish for refusing to cover their $543,000 hidden debt, the same debt they said I owed them out of loyalty, the same money they quietly structured through private loans and a home equity line while planning to use my income as collateral. And within months, his advisory license was suspended, their Texas home was posted for foreclosure, and the man who tried to pressure my clients into doubting my company was facing internal compliance review of his own. But none of this started with the raid. It started the night I realized I was never their daughter in that room. I was their contingency plan, and I chose to let the law, the numbers, and the timeline deliver the consequences. In July of 2024, my mother called and asked me for $20,000, the way someone might ask for a favor that was already approved. That was the moment I realized I was not just their daughter, I was their financial backup plan. My name is Eliza Rowan. I am 37 years old, and I run an education technology company based in Raleigh, North Carolina. Last year, we generated just over $13 million in revenue. We employ 35 people, we work with 43 public school districts across the country, and license our literacy platform in 36 countries. I started building it in 2013, 2 years after graduating from the University of North Carolina in 2011. I formed an LLC in 2019. In 2022, after crossing 8 figures, I placed 80% of my ownership into an irrevocable trust designed to protect the company from liability, lawsuits, and emotional financial pressure. To my parents, it was still my little app. My sister, Madeline Rowan, is 40. She is finishing her final year of residency at Columbia University Irving Medical Center in New York and applying for a cardiology fellowship. My father, Thomas Rowan, 65, has worked as an independent financial advisor in Montgomery County, Maryland, for more than 3 decades. My mother, Diane, sells real estate part-time and believes stability is something you display, not something you question. When she called that night, her voice was gentle. Madeline needs help stabilizing some loan payments before fellowship applications are finalized. It is temporary. Your father thinks it would mean a lot to the family. Mean a lot to the family. I asked how much. Just $20,000, she said, lowering her voice as if the word just made it small. $20,000 was not the problem. I have authorized larger transfers for vendor contracts without blinking. The problem was the assumption. No one asked if I was comfortable. No one asked whether it fit my plans. They spoke as if my income was already allocated. After we hung up, Madeline texted me, "Medical debt is normal. Private loans are part of the process. Once I'm in attending, everything will even out. This benefits all of us long term." Even out. Minutes later, her fiancé Caleb sent his own message. "Family stands together. Do not make this harder than it needs to be." I stood in my kitchen in Raleigh staring at the words. My laptop was open to a renewal contract worth $600,000 over 3 years. Payroll for 35 employees was scheduled for Friday. Our advisory board had just approved expansion into an AI-driven literacy engine launching in January, and my family saw me as liquidity. This was not new. In 2018, when my company crossed 6 figures for the first time, I flew home to Maryland for Thanksgiving. I remember explaining how our adaptive reading platform helped 3rd graders in rural districts improve comprehension scores. My father listened for a moment, then interrupted me. He told the table not to worry about me. He said I was experimenting. He said real stability came from careers like medicine. Then he added something that lodged in my chest and stayed there. He said companies like mine were the first to collapse in a recession, that when the market turned, no school district would keep paying for tech toys. He said I would probably be back home within a year looking for something dependable. The table laughed. My uncle asked when I planned to get a real job with benefits. My cousin nodded as if it were obvious. I remember gripping my wine glass and smiling while my face burned. Madeline sat beside my father, glowing in their approval. She was the golden child with a guaranteed future. I was the risk. For years, that narrative followed me. Sweet, cute, temporary. I turned temporary into contracts across 43 districts. I survived the 2020 supply chain collapse. I built cash reserves. I formalized governance in 2023 by adding 2 independent board advisors. I separated corporate and personal accounts. I structured an irrevocable trust in 2022 because I understood something most families refuse to name. Financial manipulation hides inside respectability. The morning after my mother's call, I walked through our warehouse floor while my operations director coordinated shipments to Arizona and Illinois. Everything was stable. We had no outstanding debt, we had growth projections and signed renewals. Then my phone buzzed again. Caleb. When can we expect the transfer? Madeline needs confirmation by the end of the month. A deadline. Not a request, a timeline. And then another message followed. If you can share the names of the districts you work with in New York, I might be able to explore partnership opportunities. My stomach tightened. That was not curiosity, that was leverage. In that moment, I understood this was not about $20,000. It was about access and expectation. It was about assuming I would absorb whatever debt burden they couldn't comfortably manage. I called my CPA, Margaret Ellis. I need you to pull public records on my parents immediately, I said. Mortgages, home equity lines, liens, any civil filings that are publicly accessible. She paused. If you're sure you want to see that. Yes. If I was being positioned as the solution, I wanted the numbers. That afternoon, I replayed every word my mother used. She never said they were in trouble. She said stabilize. My father didn't call me himself. He let my mother soften the request and Caleb apply pressure. Madeline framed it as unity. That's how entitlement works in professional households. No shouting, no visible panic, just language designed to trigger obligation. The evening grew quiet. The implied threat became clearer. If I refused, would they tell relatives I was selfish? Would Caleb reach out to district administrators under the guise of collaboration? Would my father hint that my company was unstable? Would they repeat the recession story until it became truth? I imagined wiring the money and watching my father quietly incorporate my income into his financial projections. I imagined the next request when private loan interest adjusted upward. I imagined becoming the permanent safety net for decisions I didn't make. The truth settled in with cold precision. They had built their financial expectations assuming I would comply, not because they were desperate, because they believed I owed them. I stood alone in my dark kitchen, city lights reflecting in the glass. 80% of my company was protected inside an irrevocable trust designed specifically to prevent emotional leverage from becoming financial obligation. They didn't know that yet. Margaret emailed close to midnight saying she would have preliminary filings by morning. I set my phone face down on the counter. If I refused to be their backup plan, this would not stay quiet. And by the next day, I would discover that $20,000 was only the surface of what they had already decided I should carry. Chapter 2. Follow the paper trail. Margaret's email arrived at 8:07 the next morning while I was still in my robe, standing at the kitchen counter with coffee I had not tasted yet. The subject line read, Public Filing Summary. I opened the attachment and felt my pulse slow into something colder. The first section detailed a mortgage refinance completed in 2021 on my parents' home in Fairfax County, Virginia. The second showed a home equity line of credit opened in 2022. The available credit had been drawn down almost entirely within 8 months. Then came the private student loans. 2 separate loans issued in 2022 and 2023. Both carried interest rates just under 12%. Both listed my sister Madeline Grant as cosigner. Combined with her remaining federal loans, the total outstanding exposure tied to the household was estimated at $543,000. $543,000. That was not stabilization. That was structural debt. I read the number again. Nearly $500,000 they expected me to quietly absorb in pieces. $20,000 was not help. It was a test payment. The next section tightened my jaw. A regulatory inquiry filed in late 2023 involving my father, Daniel Grant, and recommendations made to 2 retired clients. Status, pending review. 2 arbitration claims initiated. At least 3 long-term accounts had already transferred out of his advisory practice. Income shrinking, debt expanding. It was not complicated math. Margaret called as I was still staring at the screen. "You saw it," she said. "I did." She exhaled softly. If client attrition continues and rates remain high, they are going to feel significant financial pressure. That home equity line was not opened for decoration. They used it to cover what? Likely private loan gaps or lifestyle carry, she said. But the structure is fragile. If your father's income drops further, the margin disappears. And the private loans? Aggressive. 12% is not casual borrowing. I closed my laptop halfway. "They're not asking for help," I said. "They're trying to plug a hole." There was a pause on the other end. "Do you think they see you as liquidity?" "Yes." After I hung up, I drove to the office. The warehouse floor was loud and alive. Pallets wrapped, labels printing, forklifts moving. We were shipping to districts in Georgia and Colorado that morning. My company was not fragile. My phone buzzed before I made it to my office. Tessa Nguyen, my operations director. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "What kind of problem?" "The superintendent in Tulsa called. Someone reached out implying we might be under financial strain. He wanted to confirm we are stable before renewing." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Who contacted him? A man named Caleb Mercer. He said he was a concerned partner in the education space. Concerned? He was planting doubt. I stepped into my office and shut the door. "Forward me the message." "It's already in your inbox." I opened it immediately. The language was careful, subtle, suggesting that recent internal developments might impact service continuity, encouraging the district to consider backup vendors. Backup vendors? The irony almost made me laugh. I called our corporate attorney in Richmond. "Avery, I need a cease and desist drafted today." What did he do? Contacted a district, implied instability, encouraged them to look elsewhere. "Send me everything," Avery said. "If he interferes with contractual relationships, we escalate." Escalate how? "Tortious interference claim, formal action. But first, we put him on notice." Good. Put him on notice. Within hours, the letter was drafted and sent. It stated clearly that further contact with our clients would result in legal action. By late afternoon, my mother appeared at the front desk. She did not call first. The receptionist buzzed me. "There's a woman here who says she is your mother. She looks upset. Send her back." Diane Grant walked into my office with red eyes and clenched hands. "Your father is under immense stress," she began. "You have no idea what this is doing to him." I stayed seated. "I have a pretty clear idea." She blinked. "Clients are leaving. People are talking. We thought you would help stabilize things." Stabilize $543,000 of debt? Her eyes widened. "How do you know that number?" "Public filings are public." Her face tightened. "You were not supposed to dig." I stood and walked toward the glass wall overlooking the warehouse floor. Employees were laughing near the loading dock. Orders were moving. Revenue was flowing. "He built his whole reputation on stability," she said sharply. "Do you want to be the reason it collapses?" There it was. Guilt weaponized. I turned to face her. Am I the reason he opened a home equity line in 2022? Am I the reason private loans were signed at 12% interest? Am I the reason he's under regulatory review? She flinched. "Family does not audit family," she said. "Family does not threaten contracts either." She hesitated. "Caleb was just trying to protect Madeline's future." "By contacting my clients and implying reputational damage?" "You are being cold," she said. "No, I'm being precise." I leaned forward. If anyone calls one more district, we will file a formal claim. That is not emotion, that is liability. She stared at me as if she didn't recognize the person standing in front of her. Your father will not forget this. Neither will I. Silence stretched between us. The warehouse noise hummed behind the glass. Nearly $500,000 in debt, a regulatory investigation pending, private loans at 12%, and now attempted reputational damage. This was no longer about saying no. It was about dismantling the assumption that I was responsible for the consequences of their decisions. They thought $20,000 would buy my silence. They had no idea I was about to restructure the entire dynamic they relied on. Chapter 3. Moving the board. The next move was not emotional. It was strategic. 2 days after my mother walked out of my office, my younger brother called. Ethan Mercer was 33, living in Austin, finishing his MBA while working full-time as a software engineer. He had always been the one who believed things could be explained. I need to understand what is happening, he said. Then let me ask you something, I replied. Do you know how much debt they are carrying? Silence. Dad said it was a short-term timing issue. It is $543,000. Another pause. That is not possible. It is. Mortgage refinance, home equity line, private loans at nearly 12%. I could hear his breathing change. Why did they not tell me that? Because if you knew the real number, you would question the story. He lowered his voice. So this is why you are not helping. I am not helping because this is not support. This is financial absorption. He was quiet for several seconds. If what you are saying is true, then why are they acting like you are the unreasonable one? Because it is easier to call me stubborn than to admit they overextended. When we hung up, I knew doubt had entered him. That same afternoon, doubt entered my business. Tessa knocked on my office door without waiting. We have another issue, she said. Which district? Plano. They want a financial stability call before signing the renewal. The superintendent asked directly whether we are at risk of insolvency. The word hit harder than I expected. Insolvency. If 2 districts walk, she continued, we lose nearly $900,000 in projected revenue over the next 3 years. It would not sink us, but it would hurt. There it was. Real risk, real numbers. They were not just pressuring me privately, they were creating reputational damage that could cost us close to $1 million. This is not family tension anymore, I said. No, this is contract interference. I called an emergency advisory board meeting that evening. We are facing external reputational pressure tied to a personal conflict, I said plainly. There has been interference with district communications. The former superintendent on the board leaned forward. You respond with transparency, he said. Send proactive financials, governance details, remove ambiguity. The attorney added, and if interference continues, you escalate legally. Tortious interference is not emotional, it is actionable. Actionable. Within 24 hours, we sent formal stability documentation to every major district. Cash reserves, 0 outstanding debt, board oversight, revenue projections. If someone wanted to whisper about collapse, we would answer with audited numbers. That night, my mother called again. There's going to be a graduation dinner for Ethan next Friday, she said. Your father expects you to come prepared to discuss how you plan to contribute to the family capital pool. What exactly is the capital pool? It is a shared commitment. We all contribute proportionally until things stabilize. Stabilize what? $543,000 in obligations? You keep saying that number like it's an accusation. It is arithmetic. Her tone sharpened. Your father built his entire career on stability. If he collapses, it affects all of us. If 2 districts walk because of reputational rumors, that affects 35 employees and nearly $1 million in projected revenue. She did not respond. You are making this bigger than it needs to be, she said quietly. No, it was already big. After I hung up, I opened a different tab on my laptop. Real estate listings in downtown Raleigh. If they were planning to corner me publicly, I would respond publicly, just not in the way they expected. The next morning, I called a broker I trusted. I needed 2-bedroom condo in the Glenwood district, strong long-term appreciation, cash purchase. What is your range? 500 to 600,000. When do you want to close? 10 days. He sent listings within hours. I toured 2 properties that afternoon. By evening, I had submitted an offer on a corner unit overlooking the skyline. $568,000, all cash. The number was deliberate, slightly more than the debt they expected me to absorb. When Margaret reviewed the purchase contract, she looked at me carefully. You realize this is not just a real estate decision. I know. You are redirecting leverage. They were trying to turn me into their safety net. I'm becoming the one holding the net. The deed wouldn't carry my name. It would carry Ethan Mercer. Sole ownership, no cosigner, no lien. I wasn't buying property. I was buying control. Meanwhile, Caleb sent another message. We are trusting you to step up next week. Step up. The implication was surrender. I replied with 2 words. I will. Tessa walked into my office later that afternoon with an update. Both districts agreed to calls. After reviewing our financials, they are reassured. Good. But if interference continues, we need to consider formal legal escalation. We will, I said, and we will document everything. As the closing date approached, I felt something shift inside me. The anxiety that had lingered was gone. In its place was strategic calm. They believed the graduation dinner would pressure me into contributing to the capital pool. They believed social optics would override financial clarity. They believed I would arrive prepared to surrender. They had no idea I was arriving having already moved $500,000 in a direction they couldn't touch. The morning before the dinner, the title company confirmed that funds had cleared and the deed was ready to record. I held the settlement statement in my hands and felt the weight of it. They were trying to convert me into liability coverage. I was converting myself into ownership. My phone buzzed one more time. Caleb, hope you're ready to do the right thing. I looked out at the skyline and allowed myself a small smile. I was ready, just not for the version of right they were counting on. Chapter 4. The Dinner. The private dining room was warmer than the rest of the restaurant. Soft yellow light reflected off crystal glasses. The hum of conversation from the main floor seeped faintly through the closed doors. It looked like celebration. It felt like positioning. My father, Thomas Callahan, stood at the head of the table and raised his glass. To Ethan, he said, for finishing his MBA while working full-time. Discipline, long-term thinking, stability. Stability. My sister Claire sat beside him, posture perfect. Her husband Ryan adjusted his cuff and smiled at the right moments. My mother, Judith, squeezed my hand as I sat down. Let tonight be peaceful, she whispered. I nodded. Dinner unfolded in polished rhythm, stories about sacrifice, about how families invest in each other, about shared responsibility. Ryan leaned back slightly. In the long run, he said casually, what matters is alignment, everyone pulling in the same direction. Claire added, no one succeeds alone. The stage was set. When dessert plates were cleared, I reached down beside my chair and placed a small black box in front of Ethan. He frowned. What is this? Open it. He did. Inside was a single key. He looked at me, confused. For a condo in downtown Raleigh, I said evenly. 2 bedrooms, close to your office. The table went still. No cosigner, no debt. The deed is recorded in your name. Claire inhaled sharply. Ryan's smile disappeared. My father's voice cut through the quiet. Excuse me. Ethan blinked. You are serious. I am. Ryan leaned forward. That money was supposed to help your sister. There it was. Not gratitude, not surprise. Expectation. The sentence fell onto the table like a weight. Ethan turned slowly toward our father. What money? Silence. I reached into my bag and placed a thin folder on the table. "What is this?" my father demanded. "A summary of publicly available filings. Mortgage refinance in 2021, home equity line in 2022, private loans at nearly 12%, total exposure approximately $543,000. Claire's face flushed red. "You had no right to dig into that." "It became my right when my income was positioned as the solution." My father reached toward the folder. "This is family business." "It became my business when my revenue was treated as an obligation." Ryan's voice sharpened. "You could have handled this privately." I tried. Ethan looked from one face to another. "Is that number real? $543,000? My father did not answer directly. "We do not weaponize information." Ethan did not look away. "So you were going to let me celebrate tonight while planning to pass her the bill later." The words cut cleanly. My mother whispered, "That is not fair." Ethan's voice steadied. "Is it true you expected her to cover it?" My father's jaw tightened. "We were asking for support." "Support or coverage?" I asked calmly. Ryan scoffed. "You are twisting this." "I am naming it." Claire leaned forward, anger creeping in. "You do not understand medical debt." "I understand 12% interest. I understand cosigners. I understand risk allocation." The air in the room felt heavier. Other diners nearby had lowered their voices, not because we were shouting, because something real was happening. "You are humiliating us," Claire said. "No," I replied quietly. "I am introducing accountability." My father's authority had always been rooted in narrative control. In this room, for the first time, he did not have one. "This is not how families operate," Ryan said. "This is not how entitlement operates either," I answered. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We thought you would contribute proportionally." "To what?" I asked. "To service debt created without transparency?" My father's voice dropped. "You are tearing this family apart." "No," I said. "I am refusing to be leveraged." Ethan picked up the folder and scanned the first page. His expression shifted as he absorbed the timeline. "Why did no one tell me the full number?" he asked again. Silence. It was not explosive. It was hollow. That hollow space was louder than any argument. Ethan closed the folder slowly. "You were not asking her for help," he said to our father. No one contradicted him. Claire's voice trembled. "We just needed short-term relief." At 12% interest, short-term relief compounds quickly. Ryan looked at me with something close to disbelief. "You bought property instead." "Yes." "For him?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because they were trying to turn me into their safety net," I said evenly. I chose to hold the net instead. Ethan stared at the key in his hand. "You did not have to do this publicly." "I did not create the public expectation. I am simply responding to it." My father's voice hardened. "You could have preserved loyalty." "Loyalty without transparency is control." The word hung in the air. Control. For years he had controlled the narrative. Tonight the numbers spoke for themselves. Claire looked down at her plate. Ryan said nothing. My mother whispered, "This did not have to happen this way." "It already happened," I said softly. "The structure was already built." Ethan pushed his chair back and stood. "I need some air." He looked at me. "Walk with me." I stood without hesitation. As we stepped toward the door, I felt the atmosphere behind us fracture. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. In the hallway outside, the restaurant noise rushed back in. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I thought you were just being stubborn." "I was being protective." "Of yourself?" "And of my company, and of what I built." He looked down at the key again. "They were never going to tell me the full number, were they?" "No." He nodded slowly. "This is not about pride, is it?" "No." "It is about accountability." "Yes." Behind the closed door, muted voices rose and fell. For the first time, the leverage had shifted, and the consequences had only just begun. Chapter 5. Karma has a timeline. 3 months after the dinner, the system began to respond. It did not explode. It did not collapse overnight. It tightened. 2 additional clients withdrew their accounts from my father, Thomas Callahan's advisory firm. The regulatory suspension that had been temporary was extended pending continued review. New client onboarding stopped completely. His income slowed to almost nothing. When my mother called, her voice was no longer sharp. It was tired. "They froze most of his activity," she said. "We are waiting on the review outcome." "I understand," I replied. "We thought it would stabilize." Interest does not stabilize, it compounds. Within weeks, a formal notice of default was issued against the home equity line tied to their house in Arlington. The bank followed procedure: cure period, deadline, posting requirements. No shouting, no spectacle, just consequence. 6 months after that dinner, the property was listed for foreclosure auction according to Texas process. Public notice, sale date on the first Tuesday of the month, legal language, impersonal formatting. Their lifestyle contracted in ways they never imagined it could. Vacations stopped, club memberships quietly lapsed, conversations about renovation plans disappeared. For the first time in my life, I was not the financial safety net in the room. The house sold. Not dramatically, not tragically. It transferred from one column to another on a docket sheet. The proceeds covered part of the obligation. The rest required negotiation. They downsized to a rental across town. Smaller kitchen, fewer rooms, fewer illusions. Claire completed her residency that year. The internal academic review she had faced did not destroy her career, but it delayed her fellowship placement by a year and required additional ethics oversight. No headlines, no scandal, just adjustment. When we spoke once over the phone, her tone was strained. "You could have made this easier," she said. "I could have delayed it," I answered, "but the structure was already unstable." You always think in terms of systems, because systems do not care about pride. Ryan exited quietly before the end of the year. His company initiated an internal review following complaints about his handling of client conflicts and revenue pressure tactics. Nothing explosive, no viral scandal, just pressure that redirected itself. The campaign to destabilize my company ended not with confrontation, but with withdrawal. 1 year after that dinner, my company crossed $15 million in annual revenue. Our adaptive AI learning division launched statewide pilots. We added a third independent member to our advisory board, a former state education commissioner with 2 decades of governance experience. We were stronger than ever, without absorbing anyone else's instability. During one board meeting, the commissioner said something that stayed with me. "Financial accountability is not cruelty. It is clarity about who carries which risk." That sentence echoed. Ethan moved fully into the condo. He sent me a photo of the view one evening. "I thought you were being cold," he said later, when we met for coffee. "I did not understand the leverage." "Boundaries are not cruelty," I told him. "They are clarity about responsibility." He nodded. "I used to think loyalty meant agreement. Now I think it means honesty." We did not need to say more. Nearly 18 months after that dinner, my father called again. His voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. "I have been reviewing everything," he said. "The filings, the timeline. So have I. I should not have assumed your income was available." There it was. Not dramatic, not theatrical. Recognition. He continued, "I thought I was protecting the family. I did not see that I was transferring risk." "I was," I said, gently. Silence settled between us. Not hostile, just real. "I see that now," he added. It was not an apology framed in perfect language. It was accountability in imperfect form. When we hung up, I stood by the window of my office and looked over the skyline that had watched every decision unfold. Karma does not arrive as a single event. It unfolds across timelines. Interest compounds, reviews extend, contracts renew or do not, houses post and sell, relationships recalibrate. Consequences are rarely loud, they are procedural. I did not celebrate the foreclosure. I did not feel triumph when the suspension extended. I did not experience joy when their lifestyle contracted. What I felt was distance. For years, I had been positioned as a contingency plan, a backup source of liquidity disguised as family support, an invisible reserve account expected to absorb instability. I was never that. I built my company in my 20s. I negotiated contracts. I hired employees. I managed payroll. I read every balance sheet. I accepted risk when I chose it. What I refused to do was subsidize entitlement disguised as loyalty. Peace purchased with unexamined obligation is not peace. It is deferred consequence. If I had written a check that night, the interest would still have accrued, the review would still have progressed, the leverage would still have existed. It simply would have been attached to me. Instead, I let the structure carry its own weight. So I want to ask you something. If you were placed in a position where your success became someone else's assumed safety net, would you protect peace at any cost? Or would you protect your financial boundaries and allow accountability to unfold? Would you choose short-term harmony or long-term clarity? I truly want to know what you would do. And if stories about financial boundaries, responsibility, and quiet revenge resonate with you, stay here, because sometimes the most powerful move is not loud, it is disciplined. If you value stories where strength is quiet but unshakable, subscribe.